In a nation where the boundaries of free speech and press freedom are tested like never before, one high-profile arrest has ignited a firestorm. What happens when journalists become the story? Tonight, we delve into a case that could redefine the role of the media in America. Good evening, and welcome to Worldview, your source for in-depth analysis of the stories shaping our world. I'm your host, bringing you the facts with clarity and context on this pressing issue from the heart of current events. As we examine the arrest of former CNN anchor Don Lemon and independent journalist Georgia Fort during a protest in a Minnesota church, we'll explore the legal, ethical, and societal implications that challenge the very foundations of our democracy. Before we start, wherever you're watching or listening from, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. Today, we'll continue this conversation in the comments and respond to your questions. Now, let's turn our attention to the events that unfolded in St. Paul, Minnesota, where a routine church service turned into a flashpoint for controversy. Federal authorities have charged several individuals, including 2 reporters, in connection with a demonstration that disrupted worshipers. At the center of this story is Don Lemon, a veteran broadcaster known for his forthright commentary, and Georgia Fort, an independent voice in journalism. They maintain they were simply documenting the action, but the government alleges something far more sinister, a coordinated effort to oppress and intimidate those inside the church. To understand the gravity of this situation, we must first step back and examine the broader context. The protest targeted a pastor with ties to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, an agency that has long been a lightning rod for debates on immigration policy, human rights, and racial justice. In recent years, ICE's operations have drawn sharp criticism for tactics perceived as overly aggressive, including family separations at the border and raids in communities of color. This particular church event became a symbol of that tension when activists entered the sanctuary to voice their opposition, highlighting what they saw as hypocrisy in a religious leader's involvement with an organization accused of mistreating vulnerable populations. Don Lemon, streaming live from the scene, described his role unequivocally. He was there to capture the moment, not to participate. In his broadcast, he emphasized his position as an observer, chronicling the unfolding drama for the public. This raises a fundamental question. When does reporting cross into activism? The indictment from the Department of Justice claims that Lemon and Fort were part of a group that threatened and obstructed congregants. But defenders argue this is a blatant mischaracterization designed to silence critical voices. Consider the sequence of events as pieced together from court documents and eyewitness accounts. The demonstration began outside the church but quickly moved indoors, where protesters confronted the pastor and attendees. Children in the congregation reportedly heard harsh words, including accusations that their parents were aligned with extremist ideologies and faced eternal damnation. Such language, while protected under free speech in many contexts, can escalate tensions in a place of worship where people expect sanctuary from worldly conflicts. Lemon's presence added a layer of complexity. As a former anchor at a major network, his name carries weight in media circles. He has built a career on probing interviews and unflinching coverage of social issues, from racial inequality to political accountability. Yet, critics point to his post-CNN ventures, including opinionated YouTube content, as evidence that he has shifted from neutral reporting to advocacy. Titles from his recent videos, such as Guides on Dealing with Immigration Enforcement or Critiques of Political Figures, suggest a perspective that aligns with progressive causes. But does expressing views disqualify someone from journalistic protections? In the world of modern media, the lines between fact-based reporting and opinion have blurred. Traditional outlets like the New York Times maintain separate sections for news and editorials, ensuring a firewall between objective facts and subjective analysis. However, the rise of digital platforms has democratized journalism, allowing independent creators to blend the two. Lemon's defenders argue that bias alone doesn't strip away First Amendment rights. After all, figures like Tucker Carlson, who has hosted shows laced with conservative commentary, are still regarded as journalists by many, even as they push narratives that challenge mainstream consensus. The legal battle here hinges on intent and action. The indictment accuses the group of violating civil rights by creating an atmosphere of fear and obstruction. Specifically, it points to Lemon approaching the pastor, asking pointed questions while standing in close proximity. Prosecutors describe this as an attempt to intimidate, but footage shows the pastor engaging willingly, responding as if in an interview. This interaction underscores a key debate. Is aggressive questioning oppression, or is it the essence of accountability journalism? To provide deeper insight, let's analyze the First Amendment implications. The Constitution's press clause was crafted by the founders to safeguard the flow of information, preventing government overreach that could stifle dissent. Historical precedents, such as the Pentagon Papers case in 1971, where the New York Times published classified documents on the Vietnam War, affirm that journalists can cover sensitive matters without fear of reprisal as long as they don't directly incite harm. In Lemon's case, there's no evidence he organized the protest or directed actions. He arrived to document it, much like war correspondents embed with troops to report on conflicts. Yet, the Trump administration's swift response, posting a mocking image of Lemon with chains and a pun on his name, suggests a political motive. This isn't the first time journalists critical of the former president have faced scrutiny. During his previous term, reporters were labeled enemies of the people, and access was revoked for those deemed unfavorable. Now, with Attorney General Pam Bondi overseeing the charges, questions arise about selective enforcement. Why target Lemon, a prominent Black journalist who has openly criticized Trump, while others covering similar events go unscathed? Race plays an undeniable role in this narrative, as highlighted by commentators. Lemon's identity as a Black gay man in a field historically dominated by white voices amplifies the stakes. Critics of the administration argue that going after him feeds into a pattern of targeting minorities, from the dismantling of exhibits on slavery to aggressive immigration policies. ICE's actions, often accused of racial profiling, have disproportionately affected communities of color, leading to protests like the one in St. Paul. By arresting Lemon, the government may be sending a message. Challenge authority at your peril, especially if you represent marginalized groups. Legal experts, including those familiar with civil rights law, predict the charges against Lemon and Fort will falter. The process itself raises eyebrows. Initially, a magistrate judge declined to issue a complaint against Lemon, citing insufficient evidence. An appeal to a district judge was rebuffed with strong language, noting that no precedent existed for such an action and affirming that Lemon and his producer were journalists, not conspirators. Only on the third attempt, via a grand jury, did the indictment proceed. This persistence suggests determination over due process, potentially violating the spirit of impartial justice. One judge's opinion explicitly stated that two of the individuals were not protesters, but media professionals with no signs of criminal involvement. This distinction is crucial. Under the law, journalists enjoy protections even when covering illegal activities, provided they don't aid or abet. For instance, embedded reporters in conflict zones witness atrocities without being charged as accomplices. Applying the same logic here, Lemon's advanced knowledge of the protest, gleaned from sources, doesn't equate to participation. It's standard journalistic practice to follow leads. The debate extends to what constitutes journalism in the digital age. Is it defined by credentials from established outlets or by the act of gathering and disseminating information? Lemon's livestream reached thousands, providing real-time insight into a public interest story. Georgia Fort, with her microphone clearly marked for her independent organization, was similarly engaged. Dismissing them as activists ignores the evolution of media, where podcasters, bloggers, and streamers fill gaps left by shrinking newsrooms. Panelists in discussions around this case have drawn parallels to other incidents. For example, the arrest of Blaze journalist Steve Baker for covering January 6th raised similar outcries from conservatives about press freedom. Likewise, Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe faced FBI raids amid investigations. Consistency demands that outrage be bipartisan. Selective defense undermines the principle. If we protect only those whose views align with ours, the free press crumbles. Moreover, the church setting adds a religious freedom angle. The First Amendment protects both press and worship, creating a clash when one disrupts the other. Protesters' tactics, shouting inflammatory remarks at families, crossed into harassment for some, but others see it as legitimate expression against perceived moral failings. The pastor's dual role as an ICE director fueled the ire, exposing tensions between faith and policy. Christianity's teachings on compassion and justice clash with reports of ICE's harsh enforcement, prompting questions. Can one reconcile religious leadership with involvement in divisive government actions? Expanding on this, historical church protests offer context. During the civil rights movement, activists like Martin Luther King Jr. used sanctuaries as platforms for change, often facing arrests. Those actions, now celebrated, were once deemed disruptive. Today's demonstrators draw from that legacy, arguing that silence on injustice betrays spiritual values. Lemon's coverage illuminated this hypocrisy, showing congregants walking out in disgust upon learning of the pastor's affiliations, a revelation that might not have surfaced without media presence. Critics of Lemon argue his language during the event showed bias. He described protesters making attendees uncomfortable, interpreting their fear as a response to truth-telling. Some hear this as endorsement, but others view it as neutral observation. Journalists often narrate scenes with context. Think of correspondents describing crowd reactions at political rallies. Lemon interviewed parishioners and the pastor, seeking multiple perspectives, a hallmark of balanced reporting. The refusal to leave when asked by the pastor, lasting about 7 minutes, is cited as evidence of trespass. However, in public or semi-public spaces like churches during services open to visitors, the threshold for removal is nuanced. Federal charges elevate this to a civil rights violation, which many see as overreach. State-level trespass might apply, but bundling it with conspiracy suggests an attempt to inflate the case. Broader implications for democracy loom large. A free press acts as a watchdog, exposing abuses of power. If journalists fear arrest for proximity to controversy, self-censorship follows. This chilling effect could deter coverage of protests, police actions, or government operations, eroding public trust. In an era of misinformation, reliable reporting is vital. Weakening it invites authoritarian tendencies. The administration's focus on Lemon contrasts with unaddressed crimes, like unsolved murders linked to immigration disputes. This selective priority fuels accusations of political vendetta. Trump, known for personal attacks on critics, may view Lemon's arrest as settling scores. Yet, such tactics often backfire, galvanizing support. Lemon's court statement vowed to fight, invoking constitutional protections for all journalists. Public reaction has been polarized. Supporters rally around press freedom, with major outlets like CNN issuing statements. Calls for unity across ideological lines emphasize that an attack on one is an attack on all. Even those disagreeing with Lemon's views recognize the precedent. Today, it's him. Tomorrow, it could be anyone. Intimidation tactics, as some describe them, target not just individuals, but movements. Lemon's identity intersects with broader struggles for equality. As a Black gay man, his experiences inform his reporting on discrimination, making him a symbol for those communities. Arresting him amid racial tensions amplifies perceptions of bias in law enforcement. Finally, this case tests the judiciary's independence. With appeals likely, courts must weigh evidence against protections. Predictions of dismissal rest on weak links between Lemon's actions and criminal intent. As the story develops, Worldview will continue monitoring, providing updates and analysis. In wrapping up this segment, reflect on the core question: what defines a journalist in turbulent times? Is it objectivity, impact, or intent? Don Lemon's ordeal reminds us that the pursuit of truth often comes at a cost, but safeguarding it ensures a vibrant democracy. We invite your thoughts in the comments below. What do you make of these charges? How should press freedom be protected? Stay tuned for more on Worldview.